Hi guys, Samantha from Samantha Tutorials here, and welcome back to another experiment day. So today we are going to be working on making a similar piece to the photo that is currently shown, and I'm just going to go through my ideas on how to imitate it. So the first thing that comes to mind is texture, so I'm just writing that down so that I can remember that during the project. There's also a lot of bright colours, so let's write that down. I mostly noticed that it is primary colours, so we should stick to that when using the liquid clay. There's a lot of dark black streaks, so let's add that. It also seems like the paint is dripping in certain parts, so maybe we could add some drips. Maybe we could use a straw to blow to get that effect, and the colours also are getting swiped around, so I'll just jot that down, and that's what I'm going to work off of while we are doing our experimentation. So let's begin. Okay, so I've got some liquid clays here. I'm going to be using Kato liquid clay for the most part. I'm going to bring over some translucent to start with because that's going to add some depth. We are also going to want to work with some white, which we're probably going to be using white polymer clay, but I also think that some white liquid clay will work. I'm not going to be using black liquid clay. Then I'm going to be bringing over some primary colours, so let's bring in a red, maybe a yellow. I'm just busy looking at the photo. And there also seems to be some blue in there. The rest seems to kind of get mixed together. The green also seems to be quite apparent, so I'll just bring those over. Those are the colours that we'll work with. And I actually might bring over some black liquid clay, you never know. Okay, so that's what we'll work with. Okay, then we're also of course going to need some white polymer clay. I'm going to be using Polymer. I also want something to imitate the texture. I've got this piece of scrapbooking paper. Anything that kind of looks like a canvas texture would work. Even an old dishcloth or rag would work as well. And of course we're going to need a silkscreen swipe or a card of some kind so that we can swipe that liquid clay across the surface. Okay, and so to start I've rolled out a piece of white on my middle setting of my pasta machine. And before we start anything, we're going to want to texture this. So I've just got my texture of choice. I'm just going to roll that across the surface. And feel free to experiment along with me. I'd love to hear what you guys did if you want to play along with me with the liquid clay. You don't necessarily have to use the same picture that I am using as inspiration. There are actually lots of fluid art photos that you can use as inspiration. I'm not trying to copy it exactly, I'm just using it as a starting point. And the polymer clay is not really going to be able to imitate it exactly anyway. It's just a fun way to get those creative juices flowing. Okay, so I might do that a little bit more just to get that texture going in there. I want it to be fairly random. It actually works quite well. Let's leave it at that. I'm not too worried about the little fibres that are in there, but if you don't like them you can always just take a blade, slip it under and scoot it out. And because we've textured the piece, a little nick here and there is not going to be noticeable. This one is being stubborn. There we go. So yeah, you can easily get those out if you want to. Also, I would recommend trimming the edges because you're not going to end up using those anyway, and anything that gets touched with the liquid clay is going to get coloured, and so you don't want to use more clay than necessary. I also would recommend, if you're experimenting around and don't know what you're doing or don't really have an outcome in mind, to thin out your clay as much as you can. Not necessarily on the thinnest setting, but thin enough that for a small amount of clay you've got a lot of work surface, which means that you'll use less clay and therefore there'll be less waste if it ends up not working out. Also, just forgot while I was getting the tools that we also need a straw. Just wanted to add that to the list of supplies that are just kind of sitting off to the side here. But yeah, now we are ready to move along. So I'm going to, let's see, what should I use? I'm going to use translucent clay first. And I'm not going to put that over the whole surface. I'm going to just kind of scoot that along a little bit. And this is just going to help the liquid clay move around a little bit. But I'm not adding colour, so it won't disrupt the white base. And I don't necessarily want to use white as a base, because it will end up mixing with my colours. I'll add white, but I don't want it to be overpowering. So I've just scooted that over the surface. There's not a whole lot on there, so we can still see a lot of the texture. And yeah, now let's bring over our liquid clays. So I'm going to start with some red, and I'm just going to add a little bit at a time. And then I will bring over some of my yellow, and I will scoot that along next to the red, like so. And then some of the blue, and then I'm going to swipe that and see how it looks. There we go. Okay, then let's bring over our swipe. And actually, I also would like to add some white, just so that when it trails off it looks interesting. So I'll add a little bit of white to the beginning and a little bit of white to the end. Don't ask me my reasoning, I'm playing around. I've not done this before, this is why it's an experiment video. Okay, then I'm going to take this and I'm going to apply decent, I'm not going to apply pressure, but I am going to be scraping it with the same sort of pressure that you would give to a silkscreen when you're swiping across. Okay, and I actually quite like how that looks, it's quite interesting. Yeah, I actually do quite like that. Let's clean off the card before we move on to the next step. And I think for the next step I'm going to stick with only 2 primary colours. I'm going to keep the white, but I think having 3 was a little bit much there. So let's see. I want to have some blue. I'm going to pop it in the separate corner here. This actually reminds me of a peacock feather now that I'm looking at it. And I'm going to bring over some yellow. And I will also put the white in like I did before, because I think that looks quite nice. And as for the black streaks and the kind of drip-like effects, I'll work on that later after we've added a few swipes. Okay, I'm going to just move to the side here, and then I'm going to swipe that across the surface. Okay, then I'm going to do one with red and yellow. And I'm just going to swipe that across as well. And I quite like how that looks, and you can actually see there how the texture is affecting it once you've swiped it to a certain degree. Now I don't want to do too many more. I think I want one more here and one more here. Up here I am going to do a blue and red one, and I'm not sure what I'll do down here. Okay, and let's swipe that. Okay, and I might just swipe the excess down there. I'm not sure if I'm going to do any more. I don't want to overdo it. I think that might have actually overdone it just a touch. But yeah, I'm relatively interested in how this looks. So I'm not going to be doing more swipes. I think that works pretty well as it is. What I am going to do is I'm going to grab some white. I feel like it's too busy over here. And so I'm going to grab some white. And I'm going to streak it around. Let's see what that looks like. And I'm not going to do black because black is very strong and we've already got a lot of colours here. I am now going to take my straw and I'm going to blow, see how this goes. And I actually love how that looks. Yeah, and I actually really like how that looks. It's deviating quite a bit from the photo that we have, and this is more looking like those bubble acrylic paintings that you'd see, but I really do quite like how that looks. I'm now going to bring over a little bit of black, and I'm going to be putting that separate. Hold on, let me just get the lid off. There we go. Put a bit of black here, just a little bit, and a little bit here, and a bit here because it's looking a little bit muddy over there. And then I am going to add white on top of that one, and that one, and that one. Okay. Then let's blow, see how that looks. And this one needs a bit more white because the white ended up getting covered, so I'm going to add it to the side here so it blows over the black. There we go, and that looks quite interesting. Okay, I don't really want to fuss with that too much more because I feel like I'm going to end up muddying it too much. We're going to make some of those streaks that we saw. So I'm going to add the black. I'm going to start on this end and I'm going to squeeze a very small amount. And I'm just going to kind of add just a little bit. Okay, I don't want to go too far with that. And I'm just going to bring over a skewer. And I'm going to use that to add some light. And I'm going right down to the clay base. And I really like how that looks. And just clean it off every once in a while because it does pick up the liquid clay. And now the liquid clay of course is going to act in a very different way to paint. If you wanted to paint on top of the polymer clay, by all means go ahead and do that. You'd probably end up getting something that looks quite a bit more similar to the original photo. This is morphed into something very different, which is fine. That's why I like just kind of starting off with an idea and then it just kind of goes from there. There we go. I'm going to leave that be. I quite like those. They look interesting. I might actually do a few that aren't in the black, just in some areas where I feel like it might need some. Okay, and I think I might leave it at that and just let it settle. The liquid clay, if you leave this on the clay, will actually start to dry. So if you left this for like 2 or 3 days, you'd find that the liquid clay would be pretty much dry to the touch and you'd be able to crackle it. That's something that I found that you could do. I don't necessarily want to do that. I'm thinking I might want to bake this and see how it goes, because I'm quite happy with the result and how interesting it looks. So I'm going to think about how I would like to incorporate this into a project. Okay, and I'm just going to bring over a rectangle cutter. This is my second largest half square cutter. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of work around here, see what areas I like, and then cut out a pair. I'm not going to cut out more than one pair because anything that's raw you can still turn into something, whether it's a texture stamp or you use a scrap technique on it. So I'm not 100% sure on how this is going to turn out, so I don't want to commit to making multiple earrings out of it. So I quite like that spot there, so I will cut that out. and then lift straight up, and then make sure to clean that because you will have liquid clay around the edge of the cutter, like so. So you want to be sure to clean that. Just with a wet rag will work, just so that your next cut doesn't have that liquid clay mixing in with it. Okay, so that's the first one. Let's see, where should the next one be? I want to incorporate these streaks because I quite like how they look. I think this area looks nice. And cut down, make sure you get a nice clean cut. Oops. And lift straight up. Okay, and that should work. So the rest of it I'm not going to bake. That can get turned into texture stamps or a liquid clay technique or something along those lines. I don't necessarily want to bake the rest of it, but the rest I do. So I'm going to lift this up carefully, and I'm going to put it to a side exactly like that because I'm actually going to let this dry so that the liquid clay is it's not wet to the touch, and then maybe we can revisit it in another experiment video. Let me know in the comments below if you'd be interested in that, and we can play around with it and see how it goes. We might even do a scrap technique video with it, so let me know in the comments below if you'd be interested in that. And these two I am going to bake for a full hour at Primo's recommended temperature. Okay, and that's how they look once they've been baked, had their sides sanded and been assembled into earrings. I am really quite happy with how these look. They are quite stylish. Let me just bring you down so you can see a bit better. And one thing that I really do like about them is these black bits. It kind of reminds me of lightning bolts, and then you've got almost like these cloud shapes in the background. So if you played around with the colours with this, you could really get a nice stormy backdrop, and you could use white and yellow to create the lightning. So maybe if I ever did this again in an official project, I would actually go for that aesthetic. Maybe it could be one of the we could get one of those photos. I'm doing a series now where I use a photo as inspiration, so if we ever got like a stormy, cloudy backdrop, I might actually use this technique to imitate the photo. But yeah, I really like how they have turned out. They don't look anything like the photo that we started out with, but that's the point with the experimentation. It's just supposed to give you a starting point. Now, something else I just want to point out before I close the video. I just want to bring this over. It's not going to lie flat, but I'm not sure if you can notice, as this is drying, it's actually taking on the under texture, the texture underneath the liquid clay. So once this is dried, I think we're going to get something really interesting with it. So let me know in the comments below if you want to see a scrap tutorial on how to use this and how it looks once it's dried, because I think it's going to come out looking really interesting. But yeah, that's basically it for today's tutorial. If you liked it, please do leave a like and subscribe to get more videos like this one. And if you have anything that you would like to add in the comments, please do leave a comment. I read every single one of them. And if you'd like to support the channel so I can continue making videos just like this one, please do consider becoming a member. There's a join button below the video. There's also a link to Patreon where I also post exclusive videos that are not available on YouTube. And if none of those interest you, I also sell a bunch of tools on my Etsy shop, such as the cutters that I used today. That's also another fantastic way to support the channel if you wish. And as always, I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.